Hello and welcome to United Astronomy Clubs of New Jersey. Thank you for all joining us out here in Jenny Jump State Park in Hope, New Jersey. And thank you all who are joining us online because that is right. We do live stream these presentations on YouTube and Twitch. So if you have a question or you're like, hey, I can't remember and I want to know about that thing during the presentation, you can go back onto our archive in YouTube and be able to look up what we possibly missed. So, since a couple people I think are still wandering down, I am night blind, so all I see are kind of amorphous shadows in the distance. Um, we'll go over a couple things. Do check us out on our website, uacnj.org. That's where you're going to find a list of all our upcoming talks and all sorts of science and events that us or our member clubs are doing. In addition, you can check us out on our social media, our Facebook, Instagram. We have a Discord channel. You can also support us on Patreon because we are a nonprofit. So everything you guys have donated or bought through the sales list has gone to helping us keep the lights on, even though normally we keep the lights off since astronomy. Yay, turn of phrase. And also helps us offer our free outreach to various scouting groups or schools that we've done. So with that, you can also... I forgot where I was going. There was a thought, and now it's gone. Anyhow, so, since it looks like people have kind of settled down here, you guys get the safety briefing. So it is dark when we go to leave. We are using our headlights because we don't like getting run over, and you also probably feel the same way, that it is something to be avoided. Therefore, headlights will help us do that. If you need to use the bathroom, that is the porta potty in the back with the red light. That is the public restroom. In addition, we do have a museum and gift shop area in that door, and I actually have who's watching it while we're doing the presentation tonight. So you can also check that out. So tonight's talk is something about the Fermi paradox. We're going to solve the Fermi paradox. Even better. And our presenter tonight, Dan Kirby, he has a bachelor's degree in physics and a master's in computer science. Has been an amateur astronomer since his childhood. He joined AAA, which is an astronomy club, not the travel organization that helps you with your car, in 2021 and UACNJ in 2022. He has spent many a lonely night here up at Jenny Jump and other places wandering between the stars, much to his wife, yes. Right? Wife's dismay. I forget. I'm like a goldfish and I've with too much caffeine. With that, he's going to tell us all about what this paradox is and why we need to solve it. But it is interactive, so you guys are going to get to... Are you on?
Testing.
Hold on.
Testing. Dead battery? No, that's not a dead battery. That's a living battery. All right. So yeah, as stated, this is a talk about the Fermi paradox, and the title of this talk is. Am I too loud?
No.
Okay. The title of this talk is "Let's Solve the Fermi Paradox." So before we get into that, we have to know what the Fermi paradox is, and I will warn you. As we get into this talk, if you're like me and you have a big stack of science fiction novels on your bookshelf that deal with contact with extraterrestrial life, it's possible I might spoil a few of those. It's kind of unavoidable with this topic. But yeah, so first we're going to talk about what the Fermi paradox is and some related ideas. Then we're going to interrogate some solutions to the Fermi paradox that suggest that we are alone in the universe. Then some solutions that suggest that we are not alone in the universe. And then we're going to vote. We're going to choose a solution. I've picked 8 solutions for you, although obviously there could be many more. And we're going to do a March Madness style bracket, and we're going to narrow it down to one solution to that is the favorite for our audience tonight. So first, the first part of this, what is the Fermi paradox? So, the Fermi paradox was articulated by Enrico Fermi in 1950. So, Enrico Fermi is kind of an interesting character. He was a physicist. He was an Italian-American physicist. He worked on the atomic bomb, and he was interested in some unorthodox sorts of problems. So, one of the things he would do is he would give his employees like these what we call Fermi paradox problems. If you do a physics degree, you'll get to solve these kinds of things. So, like one day there was one of his guys was coming into the office or coming into the laboratory and hit a coyote with his car. And Fermi, starts thinking, I bet that if we figured out how many miles of highway there are in the state, and we had called the state police and asked them how often they hear of cars getting hit by coyotes, we could work out, how many coyotes there are in the woods. So he was kind of very interested in this sort of like question of, can we intuit things about nature, from limited data. So like if you do a physics degree, the Fermi problem that you'll usually get is how many piano tuners there are in Chicago. And so you have to figure it out by like, oh, well, I think, this percentage of people own pianos, and then they probably get tuned about this often, and you want to find like an answer that's like dimensionally correct. And so the other story I have to tell you about Enrico Fermi is that so he discovered the neutron, and there was a German physicist named Wolfgang Pauli who discovered the neutrino. And they were both called neutrons in the initial papers because they are neutral. And the press, some reporter asked Professor Fermi, why is your particle called the neutron, and what's the difference between yours and Wolfgang Pauli's? So if you know a little bit of physics, you know that neutrinos are very, very small particles, much smaller than the size of the proton and the neutron. And so what Enrico Fermi said, being Italian, was Wolfgang Pauli discovered a tiny, tiny neutron, a neutrino. And that's how the neutrino actually got its name. But yeah, so anyway, basically this is the paradox. Our universe is very large, and it contains billions and billions of stars and likely just as many planets. Our universe is older than we are, older than the Earth, older than the sun, and even at a small fraction of the speed of light, one could explore the entire Milky Way galaxy in just a few million years, which is a long time for us, but short on that universal or cosmic timescale. So therefore, basically, where is everybody? Why don't the aliens just sort of land on the White House lawn, right? So now I'm going to talk about the Great Silence, which is sort of a later observation. So Fermi's talking about direct physical contact. He's asking sort of why are we not province number 8792 in the galactic empire. He's not talking about contact in general. At the time, 1950s, radio astronomy was sort of in its infancy, so there wasn't this question of like why are we not getting signals from extraterrestrials until many decades later. So the Great Silence is sort of the observed fact that in the decades after Fermi articulated his paradox, we don't see any signs of extraterrestrial communication. And despite decades of searching, we have never found any repeatable anomalous signals coming from outer space. That's worth noting, that we've seen a few things that we can't explain, but they never came back, so we can't really do science on them. So the third related idea I want to introduce is called the Dyson dilemma. So this was articulated by Freeman Dyson in 1960. He was another physicist, and basically he observed that if you look over the course of our history, civilization has an ever-increasing demand for energy. So if you want to see instances in human history where energy consumption drops across the world, then there's usually some sort of calamitous event that takes place. Like for instance, COVID-19. People stopped driving. People stopped like going out, so that we needed less energy as a civilization to do our day-to-day lives. So if you extrapolate this trend forward, it would seem that civilization will eventually need even more energy than the Earth can produce. And we will need to climb what's called the Kardashev scale and build a Dyson sphere. So Dyson sphere is kind of what this artist rendering is here on the side. So it's basically this idea that you would have some sort of structure that would enclose a star and would consume all of the energy that star is producing. And Kardashev scale, I'm going to get into that on the next slide. But basically what Freeman Dyson was suggesting was that we might see stars sort of winking out of existence as their inhabitants sort of like Dyson them up. and he actually suggested that we should look for stars in like basically a non-visible star emitting in the infrared, because you would still see like waste heat from this process, right? Like you would have, if you have any electronics in your house, you know that they get hot when they're running. So basically the idea would be like the whole star would be there, but you'd only see infrared because you just see like whatever was getting hot inside this Dyson sphere. So Kardashev scale was articulated by the Russian physicist Nikolai Kardashev. This is a topic that could be its own talk. There are several suggestions of ways to modify it, but basically the idea is fairly simple. A type 1 civilization would be one that commands 100% of the energy output of its home planet. Type 2 commands the 100% of the energy output of its host star. So type 2, Kardashev 2 would be the Dyson sphere level. And then type 3 would be a civilization that is commanding 100% of the energy output of its home galaxy. So that would be a galaxy that was fully Dysoned. Every single star is, Ziploc for freshness. Where we are now, human civilization in the 2020s is basically about, depending on who you ask, is somewhere around type 0.7. And the thing that's sort of holding us back is that we're relying, pretty heavily on fossil fuels to maintain our civilization. And if we want to use all the energy the Earth is producing, we have to go basically to solar, because that's where most of the energy is coming to our planet. So as we get into these problems, and as I'm about to show you the solutions, I want you to keep in mind these two sort of slightly conflicting rules of thumb that we apply in scientific inquiry. One is the Copernican principle, and the other is the anthropic principle. So the Copernican principle basically states that we should assume that our position, which, by the way, was, as you might imagine, articulated by Nicholas Copernicus. The Copernican principle states that we should assume that our position in the universe, in both time and space, is not special. So we should assume that, like, the fact that we exist at this particular time on this particular planet is basically a random sample. So this is a general statistical principle that you can apply to a bunch of things. Like if you show up at the bus stop and you know the bus comes every 10 minutes, you should probably assume there's going to be a bus in 5 minutes, right? Because you're like, well, it's on average, that's when you're going to show up at the bus stop. The conflicting idea is the anthropic principle. And basically what the anthropic principle states is that our range of possible observations is restricted by the requirement that we must exist to make that observation. In other words, our position in the universe must be at least a little special, and insofar as, we have to be able to be here. So what would that sort of look like? Well, in my example there, like, does it matter that we exist on a planet that's orbiting, a G-class star? Maybe, maybe not. Does it matter that we exist on Earth and not Mars? Pretty clear that matters, because if we were on Mars, it would be a lot colder right now. And so the fact of our time and place in the universe has something to do with the overall evolution of our own sun, the planet itself, and possibly the entire cosmos. So now, what if we are alone in the universe? So these are the least fun ones. So now I'm going to talk about the Great Filter hypothesis. So the Great Filter was articulated by Robin Hanson in 1996. He's actually an economist, not an astronomer. But so basically the idea is that in order to get human industrial civilization on Earth, a series of difficult steps had to be passed. And it's possible that one of these steps was very unlikely, possibly vanishingly unlikely. So maybe there was something that happened in our past that it basically never happens into life in the universe. Or more worryingly, in the future, there's some sort of nigh impassable milestone that's waiting for us. So some examples of potential great futures that could have existed in our past: the emergence of life on our planet, the transition from prokaryotic cells to eukaryotic cells. That's what we call eukaryosis. So prokaryotes are simple single-celled organisms, and eukaryotes have like the cellular like organelles. So basically what we think happened was there was a couple of prokaryotes floating around, and one of them ate another one. And the one on the inside, instead of being digested, turned into the organelle that we now know as the mitochondria, which many of my astute viewers will know is the powerhouse of the cell. Exactly. The transition to multicellular life, that's probably not this one, because we actually were able to replicate, or there was a laboratory result that suggested that we could replicate this, I want to say about 6 months ago. And then the emergence of intelligence. We could go on. We could sit here all night and come up with great filters in our past. A couple of potential great filters in our future: nuclear war, climate change, artificial intelligence, pandemic illness. Now, many of you might be saying, wait a minute, Dan, like, we've had pandemics for all of human history. How is that something in our future? Actually, no. We have not had pandemics for all of human history. We've had epidemics for all of human history. But a pandemic, that is a disease that can infect the entire world, is a product of industrial civilization, because we didn't used to have, international transcontinental travel through airplanes and ships and whatnot. And then there could be other unknown technological hazards that we don't even know about, right? Like, if we had made this list 100 years ago, I don't think we would have put down artificial intelligence. Like, I don't think somebody would have said, oh, what if Skynet comes for us? Or there are other reasons artificial intelligence is scary to researchers. I'm not going to get into that, but you see my point. It's possible there's something that we just don't know about because we haven't developed the science to even know it exists. So wait a minute, but how does it solve the paradox, right? Well, it solves the paradox in two ways. Either the great filter is behind us or it's ahead of us. If the great filter is behind us, then we're the sort of firstborn civilization. Like, maybe we are effectively alone in this galaxy, in this area of the galaxy, and basically nobody else gets to where we're at. So we've got an empty galaxy that we can colonize, and we can build, we can get we find Arrakis, we get all the spice, we can build that galactic empire, right? Or the great filter is ahead of us, which would suggest that civilizations like our own are quite typical. There's lots of, Kardashev 0.7, Kardashev up to Kardashev 1 civilizations out there in the galaxy. It's just that we're all doomed to fall to the great filter in the nearish future. Now, when I say the nearish future, I mean sometime in the next like million-ish years. So I wouldn't stay up late at night worrying about this, but basically those are the two ways that this solves the paradox. So now I'm going to talk about another solution. This is solution number 2 for tonight, which is the rare earth hypothesis. Which was articulated by Peter Ward and Donald Brownlee in their 2000 book Rare Earth. You can, if you want to fit this into the great filter model, you would conceptualize it as an early filter. And basically the idea is that planets like Earth might be rare in the universe. So there's a few things that are special about Earth that are important to our existence. One, we orbit a stable, long-lived, single star inside its habitable zone. That means that liquid water can exist on the surface of our planet. On Venus, you're not going to get that because it's too close. On Mars, it's too far. We're in that Goldilocks situation. Our orbit around the galaxy is in what is now somewhat controversially referred to as the galactic habitable zone. So this is sort of the idea that if we were much closer to the core of the galaxy, then we would be dealing with, a lot, like, stars would be a lot closer to each other. You would have close encounters that could rip planets out of orbit, and you might be closer to your star, and there could be more radiation. And if we were closer to the rim of the galaxy, farther away from the core, then we would have the problem that there would be fewer heavier elements on our planet, like the carbon that makes up our bodies. Iron, other things that are fused in stars, or elements that are produced in like neutron star collapse and whatnot. Our planet has plate tectonics, which is really important for regulating the amount of carbon in our atmosphere. We have an unusually large moon. In fact, some might say it is so large that we're more like a double planet than a planet and a moon. So these are just some examples. Since this book came out, exoplanet astronomy has really blown up and has confirmed that our solar system itself is not typical of what solar systems generally look like. The obvious problem with this idea is that it makes an implicit assumption that an Earth-like planet is a prerequisite for life. So we're not dealing with the notion of like, well, oh, what if you have like an ice moon like Europa that has like some kind of squid swimming around under in an underground ocean, right? So that's the rare Earth hypothesis. This next one, I've sort of combined a few solutions into one, and that's basically the notion of that either technology, intelligence, or civilization is rare. So maybe life is common in the galaxy. There's tons of planets that have little critters running around, but there's our industrial civilization is unusual. To motivate this idea, I'm going to give you some excerpts from Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar. So basically, the idea of the cosmic calendar is Carl saying, let's compress the entire history of the universe into one calendar year. So we're going to say January 1st at 000 midnight is the beginning of time, the Big Bang, and right now is midnight, December 31st. So life appears on Earth on September 21st. Eukaryosis happens on November 9th. Multicellular life happens on December 5th. On Christmas, the dinosaurs rule the Earth. On December 31st at 2:24 p.m., we see primitive humans. At 11:44 p.m., we invent fire. Good job, guys. At 11:59 and 38 seconds, we build Göbekli Tepe. 10 seconds later, we build the pyramids, Mohenjo-Daro, and Sumer. And then 11 seconds after that, Columbus sets sail to America. So the point I'm making here is that over the course of the history, if you look at the history of the universe and the history of life on Earth, the amount of time that our civilization has existed is very small. And as noted in my little blurb here next to the space dinosaur, dinosaurs ruled the Earth for millions of years. They never invented the steam engine, the internet, space travel, or Netflix. And as we noted in the Great Filter section, a bunch of the filters are aspects of industrial civilization that pose dire threats to our species. So basically, the idea there that maybe civilizations just don't last that long. Okay, so now I know you're all here. You're not here to find out that we're alone in the universe. You want to find them aliens, right? So now we're gonna interrogate the question of what if we are not alone. So the first solution to why we haven't seen any of these aliens, even though we're not alone, is that we just don't know how or where to look. So we have been searching for extraterrestrial life for a very short time period compared to our own history. And it's possible that some of our assumptions about extraterrestrial civilizations might be based on our own biases. So in order to motivate this idea, I've included this map of the planet Mars, including the canals that the native Martian civilization has created in order to move water from the polar ice caps to their equatorial cities, except that doesn't exist. So Percival Lowell was an astronomer around the turn of the 20th century. He built an observatory down in Arizona. You can go visit it now. I mean, not right this second because you'd have to drive all the way out there. But someone watching on the live stream might be close enough to head up to Lowell Observatory tonight. And at the time, one of the biggest technological trends on Earth was canal building. We had the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Erie Canal were all sort of recent memory. So, when he looked through the telescope at Mars, he was looking for a civilization that was building canals. And in order to sort of interrogate this, now that we've visited Mars with our spacecraft, one of the things that Carl Sagan tried to do was he took the pictures that the Mariner probe took, some of the first images, close-up images we got of Mars, and he tried to match them up with the maps that Percival Lowell drew of Mars from his telescope. Because remember, he was doing this with a visual telescope. So he was out here on a night not unlike this one, sitting by his telescope, drawing this picture night after night, right? And so what Carl Sagan tried to do is he tried to see, is this guy doing like a connect the dots? Because if you look, there are some surface features that sort of kind of follow a straight line, right? So maybe he's drawing, real features on the surface of Mars, and he's just sort of playing connect the dots. No, he's not doing that. Carl Sagan was able to find no correlation between the physical surface features of Mars and the pictures that Percival Lowell drew. But it's weird, though, because Percival Lowell was always drawing the same pictures. So why was he always drawing the same pictures? The conclusion, or at least the most widespread solution that you hear, is that Percival Lowell was drawing the veins in his own eyeball that were illuminated from backlit by the light from Mars. So, in other words, we don't know how or where to look. This was at this time he's looking for canals. Maybe today we'd be looking for whoever's invented TikTok. Um, so even if there were extraterrestrial civilizations that were signaling to us in the radio spectrum, which we already know about, right? We already know about radio. How would we know what frequency to tune into? Carl Sagan quite famously proposed the frequency 4.4623 gigahertz, hydrogen times pi. That's the frequency that the WOW signal came in on. So basically, this is the hydrogen emission frequency multiplied by pi. So the idea is that like there wouldn't be any reason for a naturally occurring phenomenon to create radio in this particular frequency, but it's something that a civilization would know about, because it's really hard to invent space travel and radio technology without knowing about circles. But Frank Drake also proposed using 56.8 gigahertz, which is two other physical constants multiplied by the cosmic background radiation frequency. So we could sit here all night and come up with different frequencies that we could think of. We often see prime numbers discussed as a way of signaling intelligence, but we could also use squares. Squares don't really occur in nature. That 1, 4, 9, 4 times 16. And anyway, it's not as though we've never discovered any anomalous signals from outer space, just not any that repeated. All right, so now this is a fun one. That one was fun too, but this one's also fun. We're gonna talk about the dark forest hypothesis, the spooky one. So this was originally articulated by the scientist and science fiction writer David Brin in 1983. The spooky name comes from the 2008 sci-fi novel The Dark Forest by Chinese author Cixin Liu. You should read this book. You should also read the other two books in the series. The first one's called The Three-Body Problem. The third one's called Death's End. You can also wait for the Netflix show that's coming out soon. But basically the idea is that there will be a vast technological gap between any two civilizations that are making first contact. We can see in our own history that first contact between different human civilizations on Earth can end disastrously. You look at the Columbian Exchange, the Native American genocide. But unlike on Earth, in outer space, there's this vast gulf of time that would separate first contact from alien invasion, right? So, for instance, let's suppose today we get a signal from some star that's like 50 light years away, that's like we just launched our invasion fleet, we're coming to get you. I don't know why they're telling us they're coming, but like they're 50 light years away, and they can punch it. They can go 10% the speed of light, so they're going to be here in 500 years. So we have 500 years to invent, our defenses and build up our planet to the point where we can repel this invasion. And we have a planet to mine, to build stuff from, and they're, in the cold of space, in the interstellar void with no sort of resupply, right? So basically, alien invasion, the dark force hypothesis is suggesting that alien invasion is not a realistic outcome. That the solution that a hostile civilization will come up with would be a massive, overwhelming first strike, probably without anybody actually crossing the void, but with sending some sort of relativistic weapon. So what's a relativistic weapon? Basically, the idea would be that you would accelerate some sort of mass, probably metal, but you could also maybe send an asteroid or like a moon or something toward the enemy planet, and say it's going 99% the speed of light. So 1 ton of matter at 99% the speed of light would have as much kinetic energy as 10 million Hiroshima bombs. That's not enough to do this. I did the math for what it would take to literally destroy the entire planet Earth, like blow it to smithereens. You would probably need like a large asteroid or small moon for that at 99% the speed of light. Like our moon or the asteroid Ceres would maybe be in the right ballpark. And the other thing that's scary about this is that this sort of weapon would be impossible to see coming, right? Like if say they're sending it at 99% speed of light, and they're 100 light years away, and once again, these are the weird aliens that send us a message. It's like, hey, we're blowing up your planet. It's nice to know you. Like, well, the thing's coming at us at 99% speed of light, and the radio is coming at us at 100% speed of light. So we get 1 year, right? Assuming they're 100 light years away. In other words, basically, seeing the thing launch is more or less the same as getting hit by it. Okay, so now here's another fun one. We're going to talk about the zoo hypothesis. So this was proposed by John Ball in 1973. So maybe there are extraterrestrials and they just want to leave us alone. I don't know. Maybe our galaxy or like our just area of the galaxy is like a nature preserve. So like the reason we don't see any Dyson spheres, like winking out stars, is because nobody's allowed to do that. There's like a big, like warship that's parked up there that stops anybody from coming around, right? And so it's like the Star Trek Prime Directive. And then there's the related concept, which is that we're in a simulation, right? These extraterrestrials have built this simulation for us, presumably because they don't want to, for the same reason of not wanting to interfere with our like cultural and technological development. The obvious problem with this is who is guarding this zoo, right? Like, why doesn't anybody try to like run the blockade and break in, come down, give us the recipe for concentrated dark matter, right? So that's the zoo hypothesis. Now I'm going to talk about the stay-at-home civilization solution. So this is basically the idea that interstellar travel is like really, really, really hard. So I talked about the perspective that when you look at the age of the universe, and it would take only a few million years to cross the galaxy. But let's like zoom in and take that down to like the human scale, right? Our nearest star, the nearest star to our solar system, is 4.3-ish, 4.5 light years away. So it would take, even at the speed of light, it would take over 4 years to get there. If you've seen that movie Avatar, you know about this, because that's where the moon Pandora with the blue people, that's where that is. It's not a planet, it's a moon. Further, interstellar colonization might just be practically impossible. So Kim Stanley Robinson articulates this idea in his novel Aurora. So basically the idea is that life is a planetary phenomenon. So it's likely that any exoplanet, any extrasolar planet that we find will either be lifeless, like Mars appears to be. We don't know. Maybe there's life there. Or it will already have life that's hostile to us. So if we want to colonize a lifeless rock, we've got plenty of those right here in our solar system, right? We have the moon, we have Mars, we have the moons of Jupiter, the moons of Saturn. And if there's some particular reason they would want to come and colonize us, they might land here, and any of the microbes or organisms that already live here would likely be hostile to them and trigger some sort of immune response, right? And if you look at human history, colonialism and imperialism are pursued to seize more resources, but the resources that exist between different star systems are basically the same, right? Like we have water, we have metals, we have whatever in our solar system. It's unlikely that we have anything different compared to other solar systems. You see that even in the movie Avatar, right? Because they had to make up a fake thing that they need to get from Pandora to bring back to Earth, which was called unobtainium in the first movie, and there was like a different thing in the second movie. Anyway, the picture I chose for this slide is a map of the British Empire. I chose this quite deliberately. So this is a map of the largest empire to exist in human history in 1901, and this is a map of that empire's communication system. This is their telegraph line that you see going from London across to Canada, down to Oceania, across Australia, up through the Indian Ocean to Sri Lanka, then across to South Africa, and then back through the Atlantic back to London, right? So I want to point out something. So it took them 400 years to conquer 23% of the planet's population, and they immediately collapsed. And now suppose I'm the king or the emperor, right, or the prime minister of England, and you're my colonial governor in, where was there, in Simla or Delhi? They moved their capital a few times in British India, or like you're in Australia or whatever, right? And you're the governor, and I'm sending you my orders. I'm like tapping them out, and because telegraph signals travel at basically the speed of light, is more or less instantaneous communication. Now let's suppose I'm the galactic emperor right here on Earth. Yeah, that's right. We made Earth the capital, and like you're my governor over, on Delta Pavonis, and I'm sending you a message. Now I gotta wait for I forgot how far away Delta Pavonis is 20 light years away. So now I gotta wait 20 years for the signal to get to you, and 20 years for you to let me know whether you want to actually follow my orders or not. So is it even possible that an interstellar polity could exist, assuming faster than light travel is not possible? And then the other thing on this topic is, well, maybe the brain uploading might be possible. Maybe we could build our own simulation, right? And like we could just make a Dyson sphere, run a supercomputer, and then we could simulate a much higher number of human minds in a relatively small volume. So this is often referred to as colonizing inward by people who talk a lot about extraterrestrial civilization. So maybe that's another possible solution. You can sort of think of that as like the zoo hypothesis in reverse. That's like where the aliens have decided to put themselves in a zoo, right? All right, so now the next solution we're going to talk about is they're already here, right? Like you might, maybe some of you are looking at me, you're thinking, Dan, you're missing the forest for the trees here. Like we had that weird thing that landed at Roswell, and we solved the Fermi paradox. You got UFOs zipping around all over the place. Yeah, maybe the world's governments have already made contact with the extraterrestrials, and they're just hiding all this information from us because they don't want us to panic, right? I think there's some problems with that idea. For now, I have this list of problems, but I think it might behoove me to address some of the current events on this topic because I anticipate some people might want to ask me about David Grush and Alex Dietrich and David Fravor, the people who just testified before Congress about the 2004 USS Nimitz incident and other U.S. government involvement in studying UFOs. And I will say that I think that I believe so. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the David Fravor is an FA-18 fighter pilot who encountered an unusual object in 2004 off the coast of San Diego. I believe that David Fravor believes what he's saying. I believe he saw a weird thing that he cannot explain and that I probably can't explain. I could come up with some ideas of what it might have been. This is. Oh, hey. But anyway, it's a Starlink launch.
Pardon the interruption while we watch the Starlink train of satellites follow overhead.
Oh wow, that's a big one. Yeah. Okay. So for those who are watching online and might be confused by this, and also for those of us who are here and are interested in this phenomenon. So Starlink is a satellite internet service run by SpaceX, and the way they launch their satellites is they put a bunch of them on one rocket and send them up into low Earth orbit. So what you're seeing now is the recently launched satellites that are awaiting being boosted into their permanent parking orbit. So because they're relatively low, they're a lot more visible to us as they reflect the sun.
Yep, so we'll just give a moment here for
the oohs and ahs. So, by the way, if you are interested in spotting satellites, you can basically do it on almost any clear night. Around sunset is the best time to spot satellites because that's when they're reflecting the light from the sun on their solar panels. Also around sunrise for the exact same reason. You can see them all night, but that's when they're the brightest. Okay, so anyway, I was talking about David Fravor. I was talking about David Grush. I think that David Grush has talked about some incredible things in his congressional testimony, and I think that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It's clear to me that there are many people in our government who believe that there are UFOs visiting us, and the government has, in several points in history, studied UFOs. The problem with approaching this problem from that perspective is that it amounts to what we call an argument from authority. That what will happen is, we had Project Blue Book back in the 50s. Carl Sagan actually worked on Project Blue Book, and they looked into UFOs. And what will happen is, people will say, oh, the government's looking into UFOs. They must be real. And it's like, yeah, UFOs are real. Not every object in the sky is identified. One of the main reasons that Project Blue Book was so interesting at the time, particularly to our military, is that even though we spend a great deal of our national treasure on maintaining our defenses, we really don't have much of a way to monitor what was called the Southern Approach. So, like, if a Soviet aircraft took off from Cuba and flew over the Gulf and over, like, New Orleans, there was this fear that, like, we might not recognize that until it gets to, like, Memphis. And the Air Force was very embarrassed about this for obvious reasons. That would be a UFO, right? It would be an object that was flying and unidentified. And so there is a military interest in investigating UFOs because it's possible that it could be an enemy aircraft. And this is why there has been this shift in culture in this era of referring to UFOs as UAPs, because we actually want pilots to report things that they can't explain. Even if, we don't want them to think that they're going to think I'm going crazy if I report that I saw something, because that something might be either an enemy aircraft or it could be some sort of hazard to civilian aviation. So I do think that, like, there is some deference to, like, eyewitnesses who, like, I believe that you saw what you think you saw in that sense. But I think that, if we look over our history, UFO sightings, alien abductions, crop circles, they don't seem to be evenly distributed around the world. They tend to cluster in industrialized nations that have aliens represented in pop culture. UFO sightings are not evenly distributed in time. And, they mostly started in the 1940s. One of the things you'll notice is that in the 1940s and 50s, people see a lot of flying saucers. And then around sometime in the mid-20th century, all of a sudden we start seeing these, like, black triangles that sort of look like the SR-71 Blackbird. And government conspiracies have a history of leaking. Look at Watergate. So they've been, incredibly tight-lipped about aliens. So that's I guess maybe I try to steel man all of these solutions. I try to make them all sound equally plausible, but unfortunately I think some of my own biases can shine through on this one. All right, but now here's the fun part. We're going to do the bracket. This is the audience participation segment. So we have all 8 of our solutions here on this bracket, and we're going to vote. I hit the start tournament button.
This is the part where I get to stand with the microphone and you guys get to yell real loud.
So, for those of us here in the audience, we're going to do this by applausometer. So which do you feel is more likely? Or do you like better as a solution?
You might want to, for the first time, give a brief, one sentence summary.
I'll try to do that for each of them. The rare Earth hypothesis, which suggests that planets like our own are rare in the universe, or we don't know how or where to look, which is self-explanatory.
All right. So anyone for number 1, where Earths are rare? I think our audience is half asleep. How about number 8? We don't know where or when to look.
I really love how much faith our audience has in humanity. Okay, so
no, that seemed to be number 8 here. And guys online, do type those numbers into chat.
Drop your numbers in the comments.
We can add those in. I know you guys are a couple minutes behind, so.
So the stay-at-home civilization model, which suggests that interstellar colonization is what's rare, or they're already here. Look out, they're behind you.
All right. So who says, nah, we just want to stay at home reading books? Yeah, same.
Who says I want to believe? I feel like that was a tie.
I don't know.
What,
let's try again. Who wants to stay at home?
And who spent a lot of time in the 90s watching X-Files?
Are they?
I'm telling you, it's a tie.
I don't know. Let's see. I got a couple votes online for 5.
Okay.
So it looks like online tie broke for 5.
We'll take it. Okay, so the Great Filter or the zoo hypothesis, 2 spooky ones. So the Great Filter is the idea that there is some barrier that prevents civilizations from climbing the Kardashev scale, and the zoo hypothesis is the one where it's like the Matrix but with aliens.
Okay, so who thinks we're up against some insurmountable odd? Wow, we have faith in our abilities. Who thinks we're just in a giant zoo?
I feel like that was a pretty clear endorsement of the Great Filter.
Gosh, that's a good comment.
For those
online,
the joke was people on Instagram and their filters. I should know. I'm on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at the Intergalactic Wanderer.
Shameless self-promotion.
I'm gonna put a slide in for that later. All right. So next round: rare technology, civilization, or intelligence, or the spooky dark forest. We're in a dark forest right now.
So who thinks that technology and the stuff needed to go across space is rare? Yeah! we got the front row involved now.
Spooky dark forest. I feel like it's biased by the fact the front row voted for rare technology. Let's see what the online looks like.
Let's see. So, and the Dark Forest was what again?
Dark Forest is the idea that it's a bad idea to signal to extraterrestrials because they'll just immediately kill you.
So don't bring a picnic to the bears.
Yeah. It's
don't pet the buffalo in Yellowstone.
You're in a dark forest, and everyone else in the dark forest is a hunter, and you're a hunter, and all you have is a crossbow, and they've all got crossbows. So if you shoot your crossbow, someone will shoot their crossbow at you.
All right. So online says 7.
All right. Rare intelligence, technology, and civilization. All right, come on, guys. We only got a few more rounds here. So, our eternal stupidity, number 8, or the stay-at-home civilization model?
All right. So, we don't know what we're looking for.
What do we want? We don't know.
When do we want it?
Sometime.
All right. Who thinks aliens they have enough to do at home, they don't want to go out?
I feel like I know who won that.
I don't know.
Do you want to check online?
Yep. And both is not an option online. I'll finally get some numbers. 5.
All right. I'm giving it to stay at home. I feel like I just caused a great deal of discord.
Do we want to vote again here? Do we want to try and get our... So we don't know where to look.
All right, I'm giving we don't know where to look 2 points and stay at home 1 point because it's pretty clear that there was a big stay at home constituency. That doesn't change anything, but it's the way this bracket works. Okay, so once again, the Great Filter versus the Rare Technology, Civilization, and Intelligence.
We have a giant coffee filter coming up. Surprisingly, not as much. Surprisingly, not a lot of coffee drinkers. All right, the tech
civilization and intelligence is rare. Yep, that was clear. That's a clear one.
Yeah, I don't even think online could have helped with that.
Okay. So now for our final round for all the marbles, it's down to we don't know how or where to look, or we're all gonna die.
So we don't know what we're doing. We're all gonna die.
That's a clear tie. That's such a clear tie. You have to go online for the tiebreaker. Every time I do this talk, I keep track of which one wins, and so far it's been the same winner every time. And I have a feeling of what it's going to be. But
let's see.
I've noticed that there's a lot of pessimism about the human future, which actually applies to both of these solutions.
All right, so it looks like online was number 8.
For the third time running this talk, the winner is we don't know how or where to look. I guess everybody really likes my story about Percival Lowell and the looking at Mars. So
it's also nice to think, you know what, perhaps we need to wait a little bit for the answer versus saying no.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's slightly more comforting that we just haven't figured it out yet. It's like when you open up your brand new computer and go, that pressing the power button didn't work.
You gotta plug it in first. Okay, so this is a really interesting slide because this is where I get to talk about how this talk came to be. So I included this with some additional resources if you're interested in this topic. There's some books you can read. There's a YouTube series. If you scan the QR code, it will give you a link tree that has all the links to these. But this is where I get to tell you the story. So in November of last year, I went to the talk at the bottom there, Why We Might Be Alone, by Professor David Kipping, awesome astrophysicist at Columbia University. And I There's a recording of that talk. Unfortunately, my really awesome question is not in the recording, but I asked him a question after the talk where I asked him to comment on the grabby aliens model. We did not talk about the grabby aliens model tonight. That would basically take its own talk. There's a lot of math in the grabby aliens model. That's actually Robin Hansen's more recent work. So he's the guy I mentioned who came up with a great filter. So I asked him about the grabby aliens model, and I actually said, I don't want to cause any beef between astronomers here, and that got the whole room laughing. And then I said, what do you think about the grabby aliens model? And he said, well, I think the model solves the paradox, but you can buy books that are like 101 solutions to the Fermi paradox. So I got home that night and I went on Amazon and I typed in 101 solutions to the Fermi paradox, and this book at the top here came up by Stephen Webb. If the universe is teeming with aliens, where is everybody? 75 solutions to the Fermi paradox and the problem of extraterrestrial life. We got to pump those numbers. There isn't a 101. So I read the book and I sort of got to thinking, wouldn't it be interesting to just take these solutions and show them to people and say, what do you like? What do you think is which of these do you think is the most plausible? Another book I read on the topic, also really good, is Aliens by Jim Al-Khalili, the world's leading scientist on the search for extraterrestrial life. Isaac Arthur also has a really great YouTube series on the Fermi paradox. If you're familiar with Isaac Arthur's YouTube channel, he is really great if you want to like zone out and just have some background noise. He does these really nice long videos, longer than this talk, some of them, and they're good for like relaxation content. And you should definitely watch the recording of Professor Kipping's talk, Why We Might Be Alone, and you can watch a video of a talk that I was in the audience of, which is kind of cool, I guess. And before we go tonight, I will leave you with a quote from one of my favorite science fiction authors, Arthur C. Clarke. 2 possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe, or we are not. Both are equally terrifying.
All right. So here comes the fun part. So I'm sure you guys
Well,
have
the other fun part. The fun part is the bracket. That's way fun.
True. Everyone does love games. So we are going to have a question and answer session. Unfortunately, my handheld internet died, so I'll be running back to my computer to get those online questions. And how that's going to work is for the people here. Keep in mind, I'm slightly night blind because I've been staring at a illuminated screen and I have no night vision. So when I ask for a question, you're going to raise your hand and kind of wave it about and keep it up in the air so I can find you and bring you the microphone. Because chances are, if you have a question, someone online would also love to hear the question so we can get that answered. But first, because I know some of you are really want to get to viewing the night sky through some of the telescopes, I'm going to go over the safety briefing because I realize a couple of you snuck in the middle and you didn't get it. You can't escape the safety briefing. First of all, if you need to use the bathroom, it is like porta potty in the back. It is illuminated but in red. We do have a museum area and gift shop where we have all sorts of fun things that you can look at. You sound like Darth Vader.
I'm trying to stop it. My nose always aligns with this microphone.
Just tilt it down a little bit. See?
Nope, still there. There we go.
Like I said, you tilt. Anyhow, so we went over bathroom. When we go to leave, we are using our headlights because we do not want to get run over, and we also do not want to run over you, and using our headlights will help us achieve that goal. That being said, if you have any flashlights to get around, do keep the lights pointed towards the ground because we don't need to accidentally blind people. And with that, we're going to start the opposite of how we normally do with a question here. Does anyone have a question? I hear a lot of crickets. No one brave? I can check for an online question first. So, our first online question
Dazzled them with brilliance.
is Kardashev is not related to the Kardashians, right?
He's not. Also, the Cardassians from Star Trek are also not related to the Kardashians.
All right. Another chance. People here, anyone with a question? Perfect.
Okay. So we have so much technology developed and we have so much stuff figured out. Wouldn't there have been a way already to figure out that there was a great filter? Wouldn't there have been some way to see that? Or am I just crazy?
So the problem with seeing the great filter. So I mean, we can definitely look back on our own history and like interrogate, was this a difficult thing, right, for us to cross? And we've come up with a whole bunch of those, things in our past. But since we only have a sample size of this one planet, and as far as we can tell, life appeared on this planet exactly once. It's possible that it's appeared more than once, but it seems to have appeared once, given the genetic links we have to other animals and plants and whatever. I mean, like you probably share more there's a frog jumping around here. I probably share like 80% of my DNA with that thing. Um so
It's not a frog, it's a toad. It's a dry.
ah that now I know the difference. Later you'll have to explain to me alligator versus crocodile. But anyway,
That's the nose.
So we can't really say in that sort of probabilistic model. I feel like you could interrogate it from the perspective of like how long did it take to cross this threshold. So like for instance, you could say like, well, wait a minute, life appears on Earth basically immediately. Like as soon as it becomes possible for life to exist on Earth, boom, it's there. But then like the amount of time it takes to go from single cell to eukaryosis is huge, and then to multicell is even longer, right? So now you could suggest that means that's the great filter, right? But if you actually watch David Kipping's talk, what he points out is that is potentially a statistical fallacy, because like his argument is basically that like that runs up against the anthropic principle. Maybe the case is that it takes so long for any intelligent civilization to appear that we have to be on a planet where life appeared immediately as soon as it was possible, because if it appeared any later, then by the time we're colonizing space, it's too late. The sun expands and kills us. So that's one of the things. It's very difficult to really say, oh, there's a great filter here or there. I would argue that we know there's a great filter facing us right now. It's called climate change. And not just that, like you realize how close we've come to global nuclear war, like several times. Like Cuban Missile Crisis, Able Archer, there was one in the 90s. It happens a lot. We lose nuclear weapons sometimes. That happens.
Right. So our next online question is it even possible to command a 100% harvest of energy? In any science I have learned about, there's always seems to be some amount of loss.
This is one of the common critiques of the Kardashev scale, that I mean, like you could always find some kind of waste. And even in the example of the Dyson sphere I gave, you're losing some energy in that infrared that's coming there that Dyson proposed you would detect. I think that we could probably do a talk on just the Kardashev scale. There's been some attempts to modify it. Carl Sagan had his own thing. He shows up all the time. You try to talk on astronomy. Carl Sagan's he's jumping in there like Kramer in Seinfeld. But that I think there are a lot of flaws in the Kardashev scale, particularly because it's oriented around consumption, as opposed to being oriented around, what are you achieving as a civilization, right? Like we don't look at we look at the Great Pyramids of Egypt and we're like, wow, it's amazing they built those things, right? We don't think, oh man, that must have taken a lot of work.
Right. Is there another question from our audience here? Wow, more
I'm
you're
surprised by it.
explaining things really well, apparently.
I guess. I did this talk last week in a remote talk, and I had a ton of questions. I had one guy tell me I was off base about something, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, one of our online people did have a comment when you said it's too cold on Mars. They said, hey, you can always layer up to deal with the cold. You can't deal with the heat beyond a certain point.
That's true. That my dad used to tell me that he can always put on more layers, but eventually, if you take off enough layers, you're under arrest.
Right. So our next online question is actually, I thought they did science recently, and they had recently in air quotes, that showed the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell is not absolutely true and slightly misleading.
That might be true. I can't resist making the reference, but
no one who grew up in the 90s can resist making that reference. All right, another chance for people here. Any questions? I can keep going through online questions. Okay, so the next one is the AI uprising one of the filters coming up?
So I think like the AI uprising, as I sort of alluded to at the time, like when I got to that slide, it occurred to me that most people imagine that the danger of AI is the AI uprising, like in Terminator. If you actually look at what AI researchers are talking about that they're worried about, it's really not exactly the idea that like, because like I always had this problem with it. It's like, why would we build a machine that like wants that we want to serve us and also can like develop resentment, right? Like why would I want a combine harvester that like drives through a field picking corn all day to like know that it's gonna die eventually? Like that seems like a mistake. It's really
At the same time, that's the model capitalism runs on.
yeah,
So
well, yeah, because we don't have an alternative, right? Like we need human labor to maintain our civilization, whatever Isaac Asimov tells you. Basically the risk of AI is really more around the fact that AI is like really goal oriented. I feel like this should be its own talk, but like if you've ever heard about the paperclip thing, like the paperclip was it the paperclip model, whatever you call it. It's like I have this AI, right, that I've developed, and I want it to like optimize the construction of paperclips, and so it's like, paperclips are mostly made out of carbon. Dan's mostly made out of carbon. Slice, 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 slice. Like this idea that like you're gonna have this sort of
resources.
runaway sort of like pigheadish thing where it's like we discover that like maybe one day we discover this like solar system where every planet is covered in paperclip factories because like somebody had an AI that they asked to like optimize construction of paperclips, and it just turned the entire solar system into paperclip factories. And like I've seen other examples of this where it's like, oh, you ask it to calculate digits of pi, and like so it's got like this supercomputer encompassing the Earth. It's launching rockets into space to go mine the asteroids to get some helium-3 to build a fusion engine so that it can get farther east of the decimal point, or making more paperclips or whatever else it is. Right? So it's really more about the idea, and like I know that I'm simplifying this greatly. The point is that if you have these goal-oriented systems that like as a for instance, you think about it in the terms of like you have this robot that's walking around, it's your servant, right? And like you ask it to go get you a coffee, and there's like a baby crawling across the floor or something, right? Well, you don't want the robot to like walk over, like run over the baby, so you need to put off on like some kind of like safety mechanism to like turn it off, right? So you put like this big red button on the front that turns the robot off, and now you're like, okay, so we need to make sure that like the robot is intelligent, right? It knows that this button exists. It's gonna figure out what the button does, right? So it's not gonna be able to accomplish its goal of getting you your coffee if the button gets pressed. So if you try to press the button, that robot's gonna be like slicing and dicing to stop you, right? Or we can give it like a utility function, because right, like we're saying that basically you have achieved your utility if you accomplish this goal of getting me my coffee. So we can say, oh, well, you get 1,000,000 utility points if the button gets pressed. So now instead of fighting us to stop us from turning it off, it wakes up. I'm like, hey, can you get me a coffee? And it's like, it smacks the button itself. Right? So basically like we can continue this thought experiment. It gets really fun if you imagine like the robot gets to the coffee shop to buy the coffee, and like it's like the fastest way to get you a coffee is not to go and order one and wait for them to get made.
We're not getting Dan more coffee. He will go on for a while.
It's just gonna grab a coffee off the shelf, right? But there could be like another robot there getting its human a coffee, and now like the robots are in a huge like brawl at the coffee shop, and all the baristas are hiding behind the counter as these robots are just laying into one
All right,
another.
Dan. So our next
That's just an example.
our next online question is, why do we assume that we're worth visiting or saying hello to? Given the vast distances, what would an intelligent species get from talking to us? As mentioned, what material would be worth coming to see if life is practically everywhere?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like that kind of is part of a lot of these solutions, right? So in Fermi's case, he's suggesting that what's worth it is the Earth, right? Like they would want to colonize this solar system just to add another province to their big giant empire. in terms of like trying to communicate with us, I mean, maybe there's a civilization that would want to do that. We try to communicate with dolphins all the time, right? Like, I mean, many of us may be dog lovers. I have a dog. I communicate with my like in that sort of simplistic and reductionist notion of him being less advanced than me. Like, I try to communicate with him all the time because I need to, tell him to sit and go down and whatnot. So, like, I mean, maybe they would see us in those terms. Who knows?
All right. So I went to the question real quick, even though it's out of order, because it sets up for this question real well. How close would aliens need to get to our solar system to see that there are sentient or worthwhile life forms on Earth where you would want to investigate?
I love this question. So I think that this is an interesting question. I've talked about this in other talks I've done here. I think it's difficult to say because obviously we can assume any sort of level of technology on the part of the extraterrestrials, right? Like with a sufficiently advanced detection mechanism, you could detect Earth's civilization from, the other end of the galaxy. Problem is that this light only travels at the speed of light, right? So if you wanted to detect our radio signals, you need to be within about 100 light years because otherwise there aren't any because we invented radio, roughly 100 years ago. In terms of seeing our like signs of life, like biosignatures on the planet, I think you could be a bit farther away, maybe in the order of like a few thousand light years. But I think that 100 light years is a good rule of thumb. In that range, there are a large number of stars, but there are very few that we think would necessarily be. We don't. I don't think we have any life like Earth-like planets in that range that we've discovered so far.
Yet.
We're still
working on that technology. Yeah. Questions here? Oh, perfect.
I'm sorry. This was an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. What the heck was that in the sky?
Oh,
what was
yeah,
that?
You might have missed it. So,
what was that?
You might have missed my explanation there. So, for those of you online, there was a Starlink train that came over. So, Starlink is a satellite internet service offered by SpaceX. So they launch satellites into low Earth orbit that provide internet. They're more popular in rural areas because they are faster or like comparably fast to landline internet in those areas. The reason they look the way they do, and for those watching online, if you Google Starlink train, you'll see some examples of this, is that the way Starlink launches them is they put a bunch of these satellites, they stack them up on one rocket, launch them usually from Florida, sometimes from Boca Chica, where the new...
usually Vanderbilt.
or Vandenberg. They're the Space Force base in California.
Yeah, Vandenberg. Vanderbilt, I think,
Vanderbilt
is
a
truck company.
university or that's Peterbilt. Vanderbilt is a university in Tennessee. So they stack a bunch of satellites up and they launch them in one rocket, usually Falcon 9. It gets into low Earth orbit and releases them, and then they all sort of like travel together until they can be boosted into their final orbit. So basically, you get like 10 or 20 satellites for the price of one by doing this, and because it's in a very low orbit for the first few like cycles, then they're very visible from down here on Earth. And as I said before, for those online, if you're interested in spotting satellites, just look up at the sky shortly after sunset. You should see a few, especially if you live in a dark area.
And plus, there are websites, for example, because I think I heard someone say, "Hey, the ISS passing over earlier."
Yeah.
You can look online to see when satellites or the International Space Station are going to be visible in your area, assuming your sky is
relatively
actually
dark.
like tonight.
But even in New York City, you can spot the ISS. It's very bright. It came over here. I was up here on Thursday night. I saw the ISS go over. It was brighter than Venus.
All right. So our next online question is, how much larger is our moon compared to Pluto to have made that comment? I'm assuming that comment.
Well, so it's not really a comparison to Pluto. I'm in favor of Pluto being a planet. For the record. But it's really more. Oh God, I have to explain this again. This came up in the last time I did this talk. Basically, the moon is very large compared to Earth. So our moon is like the 5th largest moon in the solar system, which is really impressive when you consider that the other 4 ahead of it are all moons of gas giants like Ganymede, Callisto, Titan and whatnot. So our moon and the Earth are very like a very weird ratio. This is a potential rare Earth solution. And Isaac Asimov actually proposed that we should consider us to be a double planet. Generally, the definition of a double planet is that you would have two objects where it's like not like a thing going around another thing, but more like they're both orbiting a common barycenter that's like in the middle. So Pluto and Charon, which is Pluto's largest moon, actually are a double planet. So by the way, we don't get yes, I think Pluto's a planet. No, I don't think we have 9 planets because we have at least 10 because Pluto's 2 planets. But if you want to count the Earth and Moon as 2 planets, well, right now the barycenter of the Earth-Moon system is inside the Earth, but because the Moon is getting farther and farther away from us, eventually it will be outside the Earth, and we will be a double planet by that definition of a double planet.
All right. Ooh, this comment's fun. On Christmas, the dinosaurs ruled the Earth. Sounds like a B-rated sci-fi flick.
Yeah, it's like Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. You ever seen that movie? It's not. They forgot to put the copyright notice in it, so it's like or it's on public domain. If you go on YouTube and search Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, you're gonna have a fun night. You might not want to be sober when you watch that.
Fun. Okay, so we're coming down to the last few online questions. Was there another question out here? All right, so we're going to try and get through these quickly. I know you have a lot of information, Dan. Oh, Lonnie actually had said earlier, Lonnie Bunis is actually one of our other speakers who presents regular. Radio is a recent invention. Alien civilizations might consider it to be a primitive form of communication replaced by things like optical, like fiber optics or lasers.
So I think there's some value to this perspective. I've seen this suggestion before of like because if you look at over our history since we've invented radio, we have gotten a lot less noisy in the radio spectrum. So like when radio's invented, you have these flamethrower radio stations like beaming like 1010 winds across like most of the half the planet, right? And now we're mostly looking at our phones, which are on Wi-Fi, which is very local. And the idea basically being that as a civilization advances, it gets to like more and more local communication, and you don't have this need of like wide scale radio stuff. I think there's value to that perspective, but I will point out that I think the idea that in the future we're going to switch to using gravitational waves, which Lonnie did not mention, but I've seen that in the past. I don't think gravitational waves are a good way to communicate, even if you have the kind of energy to produce them. You could come up with a better thing to do with that energy, basically, is my point.
All right. And Red Dog, no, we're not. You cannot vote that we're in a simulation and the exit is eating silica gel packets. That is not something we do. We do not endorse that solution. They say do not eat for a reason. And I needed to put that out there.
They say not to do a lot of things.
Dan, no. Don't make me get the rolled up newspaper for both of you. All right. So I just want to put a last call for any questions online. I do like to give them a couple minutes just because they are on the time delay because yay, internet. That's how streaming works.
Yeah, that's that delay from that I talked about with the you're sending your telegram across the world. There's a little bit of it's basically instantaneous, but there's a little bit of delay.
All right. So any last minute questions from our people here? All right. So I want to thank everyone for joining us both here in person and online. This is always really fun talk. Like I said, do check us out on our website, uacnj.org. You'll find all of our upcoming programs. If you want to go back and there's a part of this paradox you're like, man, I wish I heard something I want to look a little more closely into. Do check that out on YouTube. Hit those like and subscribe buttons on the YouTube and Twitch, just because it does help us let us know that we are doing good things. We are trying to push towards various things that help us keep the lights on without sounding like we're begging.
Keep the lights off.
Well, yeah, we do want to keep the lights off, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, we want a reasonable amount of
yeah, light pollution. be aware.
We want a reasonable amount of light without overdoing or underdoing it.
Better lights for better nights.
All right, so it looks like that wraps up our online question. Because the last comment is maybe. Oh, the last comment was maybe you solved it. They turned off the lights to better observe.
Yep. It's time for that. Please go out and enjoy the telescopes. It's a really nice clear night up here.
Yep. So thank you, Dan, for a great presentation. Thank you guys, and have a good night.